Work session order. Melissa, can we get a roll call?
Yes. Mayor Mark Sukup. Mayor Pro Tem Brett Hansen. I
Here.
have to get used to that. Sorry. Councilmember Lisa Lake. Here. Councilmember Robert Oxmacher.
Present.
Councilmember Luke Wagner.
Here.
It's a little weird for me too, Melissa. It's all right. With that, we'll move on to business for a work session with Larimer County on regional transportation, and we'll have Eric start us off.
All right, so this evening, we're going to be discussing regional transportation. Larimer County asked to have a meeting to go over what they're looking at and kind of a whole region approach to this issue. Before they started, I wanted to be clear with you guys that there are two different groups in this area that are looking at regional transportation. The word TAC gets thrown out a lot, which is Transportation Advisory Committee. And there's two different TACs that are getting thrown around. One of them is with the North Front Range Metropolitan Planning Organization. Big, long word. They are in this northern region, both Larimer County and Weld County communities, looking at regional transportation, and that's a mechanism by which federal dollars are getting funneled through. The meeting this evening is not that TAC in that group. Larimer County in 2018 formed another TAC group to discuss regional transportation needs in Larimer County. It was formed that way so that entities that weren't in the MPO, Wellington and Estes Park, could be part of these conversations and looking at funding needs through that process. And so this is the Larimer County TAC group that's talking tonight. Mark Peterson with Larimer County is here, along with Jenny Young, which is their consultant from FHU, that has been working jointly on this. I am a member of both TACs, so I have been participating as Timnath's representative to both of these groups and in all the meetings with Larimer County on this topic. So with that, unless you have any other basic questions, I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
And then Mark, would you like us to wait until the end to ask questions or just ask as we go, or?
I think we'd prefer to sort of hold questions till the end.
Okay.
We have a whole presentation here.
Okay, thank you.
So good evening. My name's Mark Peterson. I'm the engineering director or county engineer for Larimer County. We do appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you about regional transportation. To give you a little context, one of Larimer County's strategic objectives or goals has been to try to address regional transportation needs in the county. And that was actually a goal that was put forth by the prior Board of County Commissioners. And as Eric indicated, those efforts were started in 2018. And we brought together both a technical advisory committee as well as another group that at that time we called it the regional, I'm going to forget the name, a regional task force. And that was made up of elected representatives of the municipalities, the county, as well as other interested parties. We had the we had invited Colorado State University and other interested parties, chambers of commerce, to participate in that effort. And so we went through the process of identifying a number of infrastructure projects that were needed. The TAC worked really collaboratively and on a great participation basis across the region to look at the needs. It culminated in a sales tax measure that was placed on the ballot in 2019. And that measure did not pass. It was a request for a 1/2 cent sales tax countywide. Certainly the county learned a couple key points from that effort. We made the mistake of bundling that tax increase with both transportation and facilities. We had some polling that was done in advance of all of that it indicated that that wouldn't be necessarily be a problem, but for a range of reasons, there was confusion about what was going to be produced and what the sales tax was going to fund. Again, it didn't pass. The other thing we learned is we had this regional task force that had elected representatives on it, but that really wasn't the best mechanism for getting information back to the entire elected bodies at each municipality. And so as county staff went out in advance of the election vote and met with the different communities, there wasn't full buy-in from all the municipalities in terms of that tax measure. So what we've done is we've kind of taken a step back. There was a meeting in March of 2020 after the election didn't pass. And at that point in time, there was still interest in the region and kind of looking at needs and where we would go forward. And then, of course, COVID hit and transportation wasn't the hot topic anymore. It was, we got to focus on health and social needs. So just in December of last year, we've sort of reformulated, brought the TAC back together. And then we also had a meeting with the city and town administrators and managers in early March of this year. Again, there was really consensus from that group that this is an important topic. And so now we're out to kind of take it on the road here. And so we're having work sessions with each of the municipalities. We started off yesterday with a presentation, the same presentation to the Board of County Commissioners. So you're the first municipality that we're making this presentation to, and we'll continue with these presentations through the months of May, June, and July. It's going to take that long to get on everybody's calendar. So with that as a quick introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny Young. Jenny is our consultant. We benefit from the fact that she's been involved in the whole process, even back in as early as 2018. She's a principal with Felsberg Holt, and many of you know her. She's been involved in transportation planning in the Front Range for over 20 years. And her name's on your transportation master plan as the project manager, I believe. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jenny. We do have, at some point, Jenny's going to do some online polling, and it will make use of a phone or computer or tablet to actually get input from you. Thank you.
Good evening. So the Larimer County Technical Advisory Committee came up with this mission statement to kind of describe the work that we're doing, which is a cohesive and collaborative strategy is needed to identify solutions for regional transportation needs. And we'll get into what exactly we mean by regional transportation in a minute. And so as Mark said, we're doing this roadshow and talking with all of the elected officials in Larimer County, and we're doing the exact same presentation, asking the same questions to really try to gauge each community's interest in continuing these conversations around regional transportation. And that really is the purpose of this evening's discussion with you, is to assess and inspire your desire to collaborate and cooperate on regional transportation solutions in Larimer County. So we'll do a little bit of just ground setting with defining regional transportation so we're all on the same page. And then I'll provide a bit of a snapshot of regional travel, just to give you some background context on what we're seeing in terms of the movement across Larimer County and the region. We'll talk a little bit about the current funding environment, and then we hope to spend most of the time this evening doing this interactive polling, keypad polling with you, and then we have some discussion items to get your feedback on. Okay, so in terms of defining regional transportation solutions, and this was one of the questions that we posed to the city and town managers when we met with that group a month or two ago. We asked, what does regional transportation really mean to you? And this is the definition that we came up with based on the input from both the TAC and the managers. improving mobility for people, goods, and services using any travel mode, whether it's driving, riding transit, bicycling, or walking, or other means between communities and across our region. So hopefully that helps to kind of set the stage for what we're talking about, all modes, but, connecting communities in Larimer County and, movements across the region. Okay, so let's move into the regional travel snapshot. I think it's easy to focus on your own community and what you see and experience every day in Timnath. But as we think about regional travel, I think it's important to kind of step back from that and put on a regional hat and try to understand the unique travel patterns that are experienced and travel needs that are experienced across Larimer County. So we've pulled some information predominantly from the U.S. Census about commuting travel patterns, and this is data that's easy to access and readily available. So these pie charts show the teal shows the employed residents who work somewhere else from each of these communities. So like if you look at Timnath, 98% of your employed residents leave Timnath each day for work. And you can see there's, a variety of, what that percentage is. Timnath is the highest percentage of folks leaving the community for work. And on the other end of the spectrum, Estes Park and Fort Collins have about half of their residents that leave each day for work. But it's also important to look at the magnitude of those numbers because like for Timnath, even though it's a very high percentage, it's a relatively small number. And these numbers are from 2019. So they're a little bit dated and these numbers may be, increasing and larger today than they were in 2019. But nonetheless, I think it gives you a good feel for the variation in what's happening. And then if you look at Fort Collins, you have, even though it's only half of the residents that leave each day for work, it's over 30,000, people who are leaving for work. So, generating a lot of regional trips. And then we also looked at, so this is the opposite these are the employees that are coming into each community for work each day. So again, the percentages range from 56% up to 99%. Similarly, you see a strong in Timnath, you have a strong pull from other places for the folks who are employed within Timnath, come from outside of Timnath for their jobs. But again, you see, in Fort Collins, even though there's a relatively lower percentage of folks coming in, it's still quite a high number at over 48,000 trips. So it gives you kind of hopefully gives you a little bit of a feel for, the movements that are occurring between communities. And then when we look county-wide, the numbers aren't quite as extreme. About 40% of employed residents in all of Larimer County leave each day to go to work in another county. And the top three destinations outside of Larimer County are Weld County, Boulder County, and Denver County. But you can see the range of different travel patterns. I mean, some folks are traveling as far away as Douglas County and El Paso County for work. And then looking at the reverse, the employees who come into Larimer County, similar on a percentage basis, 37% of employees in Larimer County come from elsewhere. But here you have a stronger pull from Weld County, where almost 16% of those folks who are employed in Larimer County come from Weld County. So what does, all that movement, all that back and forth look like? We tried to, show you kind of diagrammatically what this all looks like. It means that, we have a lot of movement in our transportation system every day. And that creates congestion, that impacts the quality of life for people. You know, it means longer travel times as we have more congestion. It means longer travel times. You know, it impacts not only quality of life, but the economic vitality of the region. And I think it's also important to note that these numbers that I'm showing you are only commuter trips. And of course, we know that there are a lot more trips that are happening on our road network. Those are the ones that are easy for us to grab from the data. But we're seeing a lot of, whether it's medical trips, shopping trips, trips to daycare, tourism, that are happening between communities, and not necessarily, you're not necessarily doing all of those trips within your own community. So it's important to think about all of the other trips that are happening, across the region in addition to those community trips. And not all of those trips are happening in cars. This map shows the public transportation in Larimer County, and while there are some local transit service providers in Larimer County, there are a few regional routes that provide for some of this inter-community service or travel patterns with public transit service. So, when we put all of this together, what it really means is that each community in Larimer County has sort of a unique story in terms of the way that people are moving in and out of the community. In Timnath, I think one of the unique things about Timnath is that you experience a lot of regional travel that doesn't have a trip end, beginning or ending in the community that is passing through, but you feel the burden of those trips passing, along Harmony Road. And every community in Larimer County has a unique story and a unique situation that they're, experiencing relative to regional transportation. But the bottom line is all of these different things are creating regional travel in this really connected, mobile community of Larimer County. So let's talk a little bit about the current transportation funding environment. You may be aware of the relatively recent both state and federal transportation funding bills. On the state side, Senate Bill 21260 provides $5 billion in transportation funding for Colorado. Not all of the $5 billion is new funding. Some of it is a commitment of general fund transfers. But this does provide some additional money directly to the communities all across the state. But in Larimer County, that equates to about $50 million over the next 10 years. And that goes directly into your Highway Users Trust Fund or HUTF fund. And then in the Senate Bill 260, I'm not sure how much you all have been tracking Senate Bill 260, but it has a strong focus on greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So all regionally significant projects are subject to the greenhouse gas mitigation requirements. And there's still some uncertainty about how that all will play out. The rulemaking came out just a few months ago, and so there's a lot that's still in the works relative to how that's going to play out. And the MPOs are right now in the process of going through their planning process and looking at their projects and what are those greenhouse gas emissions associated with their 10-year plans. So a lot of uncertainty there, and there's also uncertainty about some of the funding sources, the new gas and registration fees. Just because of the economic climate, there's been some reluctance to go for these new fees. So the level of funding, there is some uncertainty associated with that as well. On the federal side, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, was passed last year, and that is a $1.2 trillion legislation, which is a number that I personally have a hard time kind of really grasping. But it is a 10-year infrastructure investment strategy. It's very grant focused. There are a lot of federal transportation grants, some of which are a continuation of grants that have been available in the past. and there are some new grant opportunities as well. It does have an emphasis on projects with regional impact, as you may imagine, and there is an expected trend in awarding those federal funds to projects that are multimodal in nature, things like transit, trails, complete streets, multimodal projects, resiliency focused projects, and a strong focus on equity as well. And that we've seen this in the last several cycles of the federal funding grants, and we expect to, continue seeing that going forward. So, one of the challenges that we have is that the public perception is that transportation is funded. We have these state and federal funding sources. So, we're good. We should, all of our problems should be solved. But that is not quite the full story. There are some notable gaps in the funding that is available for transportation, and just some considerations that, I think we all need to be aware of and be thinking about as we grapple with how to address the needs of the transportation system in Larimer County. Construction costs are increasing at a really unprecedented rate. So that means, the longer you defer a project, the cost is escalating, and it's hard to, catch those escalating construction costs. The federal infrastructure bill is very grant heavy. It's very competitive to be able to secure those federal grants. Typically, the local match requirement is 20%, but to be competitive, you often have to have an even higher local match than 20%. There's a gap for non-regionally significant projects as defined by Senate Bill 260 and the CDOT rulemaking. So if a project doesn't qualify as being regionally significant, you may not be eligible for all of the potential pots of potential funding. And then this shift in focus toward multimodal projects and transit projects does reduce the ability to fund capacity projects. So, pure capacity projects may be more challenging to seek state or federal funding for. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there is some uncertainty about how the greenhouse gas rulemaking will be applied and what exactly that looks like. We're still awaiting the baseline greenhouse gas emission numbers to really understand what those mitigation requirements are going to look like. So going back to the local funding attempt in the 2018 and 2019, and Mark provided a good kind of overview of the work that was done in Larimer County. We did form the Technical Advisory Committee and Regional Task Force back in 2018, and that group worked together to identify regional transportation infrastructure projects to the tune of over $500 million in needs. And the group went through a process of evaluating and ranking those infrastructure projects to identify a short list of projects that are shown on the map. And those were the projects that would have been funded by the sales tax that went to the voters in 2019. And then the transit lagged, so we didn't get as far along in the transit planning process as we did with the infrastructure projects, but we did identify eligibility criteria, and transit was a component of that ballot question. So, there was a lot of great collaboration that happened in that process to get to the ballot, but in the end, it was unsuccessful. And, some of the key takeaways that we've heard since the failed ballot measure was that, identifying the right mix of projects that works for, all of the communities in Larimer County and resonates with the public is challenging, to come up with that right mix. Mark mentioned that the message was not getting back to all of the city councils and town boards and the community leaders. And that's a big reason why we're doing this roadshow now, to really start off having these conversations with you all and make sure that we're understanding what your interests are. And, is there a desire to have these conversations and continue to try to work together on regional transportation solutions. And the last effort was funded entirely by Larimer County, and there's a notion that the municipalities should have sort of some skin in the game and contribute to the effort in terms of a monetary commitment as well as a commitment to participating, from a leadership level and being engaged in the planning process. And then lastly, the bundling transportation with the facilities, which was on the ballot question, was a mistake, and that was viewed generally negatively by the voters. And so, that was certainly a lesson learned from that 2019 ballot question as well. Okay, so hopefully that provides a reasonable context for you in terms of, our thinking about regional transportation and sort of setting the stage for the need for transportation solutions in Larimer County. So we're going to jump to doing some interactive polling now. Do you all have a phone accessible or laptop or something? Okay. So if you would go to menti.com and just any internet browser, and then you should be able to enter that code that's on the screen, which is 28822895. And if you'll just give me a little thumbs up when you have that working. Okay, you're good? So while you're getting that pulled up, I mentioned that we're asking all of the communities, all of the elected officials, these same questions. And really the idea here is to gauge your interest in continuing the conversations and to understand what is really most important to you and what are the critical issues to be addressed relative to regional transportation. So this first question, what are the critical issues for your community that impact regional transportation? And if you would rank these 5 options that we have listed here: congestion on regional corridors, jobs, housing balance, cost of living, affordable housing, lack of transit options, and tourism. Is Menti working for everyone? Good. Oh, there we go. We've got 4 votes in. Okay. I'm going to continue going through all of these polling questions, and then we'll have a couple of discussion questions at the end, if that works for you. Okay, how important is regional transportation compared to other topics in your community? We've heard that regional transportation is included in everyone's comprehensive plan or transportation plan, but we'd like you to think about how important is it to, relative to other topics that you're grappling with in your community. Is it a top priority, a moderate priority? And now I can't see the other options, but you can. How important is it to address regional transportation needs compared to local transportation needs within your community? This one I think is a slider scale. Okay, so they're both important. Or neither is important. What's that? Connected, yes, right. What is your level of interest in coordinating and cooperating on regional transportation solutions with other communities in Larimer County? Okay, so now I have a series of 3 slides that ask the same questions. So you'll see a variety of different topics. What approaches are you interested in exploring to address regional transportation needs? So on this first slide, and again, these are sliders, now it goes from not at all interested to very interested. Better understanding the public's perceptions about regional transportation needs, aligning projects with broader community and regional goals, such as air quality and land use, educating the public about transportation needs and funding, and developing a plan for regional transportation. And after we get through these 3 slides, then I'm going to bring them all together and you're going to have to pick your top 3 choices. So keep an eye out for the ones that are most important to you. Okay, next, same question. Are you interested in working with the business community to identify mutually beneficial projects? Working with marginalized communities to identify mutually beneficial projects and solutions? Pooling funds, so this is just as an example, taking those Senate Bill 260 HUTF funds and pooling them from all of your communities to address regional transportation needs. Could be other sources of funding, but the idea is to pool funds. Providing grant writing support to smaller communities, and this one is recognizing the strong emphasis on grants in the federal infrastructure bill. Okay, so those are all in the middle of the row. Okay, and then the last group, implementing regional transportation impact fee. Larimer County does have a regional transportation impact fee enacted, and Fort Collins and Larimer County are the only 2 that currently assess those fees to developers. Pursue new regional or new transportation funding, such as a sales tax or property tax. Establishing a regional transportation authority or RTA to govern a new funding. Collectively lobbying for transportation funding at the state or federal level. Okay, so now the last one is a roll-up of all of those items that you saw on the last 3 slides. If you would please pick the 3 that you're most interested in or are most important to you. Okay, interesting. So the collective lobbying was the selected by 3 of you, pooling funds, working with the business community, and understanding the public's perception were also selected by. Okay, interesting. What resources is your community willing to contribute? And just to provide a little context, I mentioned that Larimer County funded the last planning effort, and it was about $200,000. So we put $25,000 in there just to provide some magnitude, so you didn't think it was like $1 million ask. And please know that this does not mean a commitment. It's just we're just trying to gauge your interest in participation at with funding. Staff resources, for example, Eric participating as part of the TAC, and active participation from leadership and elected officials. So now thinking back to the travel patterns, do you think there should be consideration for expanding the region beyond Larimer County? Okay, 3 of the 4 of you said yes. So if you said yes, what is the geographic extent of the region that you think should be considered? And if you selected no, feel free to, this is just an open-ended response. You'll have to type it in. If you put no, if you wouldn't mind just jotting down your thoughts on why keeping it to Larimer County is important. Is anyone still working? I know it takes a little time to type on your phone. Okay, good. Those are great insights. Okay, so that is it for the polling questions. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and I hope that we could have just a bit of discussion on these last two questions. What we would like to hear from you, what are the must-haves for your community to coordinate on regional transportation solutions? And then the second question, and you can answer these together if you'd like, what are the deal breakers that would prevent you, your community, from coordinating on regional transportation solutions?
Go ahead and open it up to anybody that wants to start us off, jump in.
I guess I'm interested to know about the governance structure of how this would look. I'm new to the council, so I don't really have the history of it, so I don't understand if how you imagine that looking from your point of view and how each individual community is weighted in this governance structure. How each individual community would be weighted.
Well, and that would be be determined, through this process, what the governance looks like. But, in the 2018, 2019 process, we started some discussions about what the governance would look like, had the sales tax passed. And some of the things that we talked about were, each community having a seat at the table, a representative from the elected bodies from each of the communities having a seat at the table. And being able to, have a say in where the money goes and how changes would be handled, and they would be inevitable. But all of that, what that governance looks like would be to be determined, and notably what the weighting would be from each community would be to be determined. So if that is there anything within your question that might be?
Yeah, I guess we're just a smaller community than some of our neighbors. So I was just asking, how do we have the right representation if we're going to be involved in this,
Okay.
the TAC, if you will.
Thank you.
Anything else there, Luke? All right.
I think to add on to that is that I think what has happened sometimes in the past is that the smaller communities put more effort into it than what they get out of it. And so I think my thoughts are regionally, I really feel like Weld County for us would be important to have involved because so much of our traffic comes between Weld and Larimer. I mean, if I go to the grocery store from my house, I travel into Weld County. So I think it would be important to look at who all is involved and, wow, that got really loud. Who all is involved and kind of like Luke was saying, as far as how that distribution is made. You know, you saw our numbers as far as how many people travel outside of Timnath to work and how many people who don't live in Timnath come into Timnath to work. So I think that's somewhat telling of, you know, even our traffic patterns and have way more people than live in Timnath kind of thing. So I think that would be something important to look at.
I'll go ahead and kind of piggyback on some of those comments. A lot of our transportation issues that we deal with here in Timnath are due to regional traffic. And it is sometimes a little frustrating to have to tell people the limitations we deal with the I-25 on one side and so much of our traffic coming through from other communities. So I'm certainly open to the concept of collaboration, but I would echo some of the concerns that Luke and Lisa brought up. I want to see projects that are going to be impactful to Timnath. You know, for example, on the one slide you have the short list of projects, and there's 2 or 3 that show up on there that are even on this side of the 25. And I understand, you know, I drive around different areas of Fort Collins, so I would get some benefit from the Fort Collins to Loveland areas getting lots of attention. But, you know, our primary responsibility is how can we better the traffic situation in Timnath, leaving Timnath, coming into Timnath. So I would want to see some direct benefit from the project selected. I'd also want to know more about what exactly is expected from, you know, the staff support, the monetary contribution. I'm assuming, and Luke alluded to this, you know, that not every community needs to contribute the same amount. You know, we're not the same as Fort Collins and Loveland. And also, you know, do we need a dozen different engineers involved on this? I don't understand exactly how that relationship looks, and I want to make sure we're respectful of our staff members' time. I'd also want to, it seems like to me, if I understand correctly, you're trying to figure out where you're going to get additional funding, if this is a lobbying, if you're going to do another ballot question, if there's going to be an additional fee put on development. This community is sensitive to any kind of tax increase vote. It just is. And I'll tell you right now, I don't remember the ballot question in 2019, but I probably voted no. If it was bundled with facilities, it was probably my just initial instinct of, I don't want to pay for bureaucrat offices. So I think it's wise that you've unbundled those things and really focused it on the actual projects there. So those are my general thoughts on it. Go ahead, Lisa.
I'll echo what Brett said about the tax piece. As a council member, I would have a really hard time promoting that piece with what I know right now. And so I think looking at other options and kind of knowing where that group is looking for funding, I think could play a role in what I personally put into it as well.
I think I'd be also interested to see how, I think you put in here, like, how do you compare against the other communities? So I think that'd be interesting to see how everybody within this presentation actually comes back, and if there's actual alignment and goals of what we'd like to see. I'd like to see that.
And if I could respond to that?
Yeah.
I anticipate after we're done with this roadshow, you know, bringing back a summary to everyone so you all can see, you know, what we heard from all of the communities, and then what the next steps, if there are to be next steps, would be.
I did have one quick question on one of the slides, just to make sure I understood it correctly. You mentioned that in the state funding, $5 billion has been allotted over 10 years. And we will get 50 million of that for our county. Did I understand that correctly?
That is specifically $50 million that goes to the Highway Users Trust Fund. So that is already set and
Okay.
is going into your HUTF funds. But that's not to say that that's all the money that will come into
Okay.
Larimer County. There certainly will be additional funds that come into Larimer County.
Okay, that was what caught my eye, that we were only getting 1% of.
No.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
I have an additional question. When you showed the data as far as how many commuters come into Timnath from other communities, is information available to break that down as far as what percentage come in to work in Timnath from Fort Collins, from Loveland, from all the other communities? I know you showed the county level one where that movement is, but is that something that's publicly available to look at as well?
It is, and it's the website is called On the Map. It's the U.S. Census, and it's real easy to use. You can choose different geographies and look at, where the community. It's all commuter based. It's the longitudinal employment and household dynamics survey. So it's looking at all commuting trips, but it's really interesting to play around with.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Okay. Anything else from our guests?
That is it. Thank you for your time and your input. We appreciate it.
Okay, we appreciate your time as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric, do you have anything else to add?
No, one of the things I think I'd like to say, just to maybe address some of your questions about governance, this is a completely new effort and is starting again from the ground, so to speak, in terms of how that goes. Last time around, I was really appreciative of what the TAC came up with last time. The MPO TAC funds that we get are very heavily weighted to population. We have not gone after them in a long time because the amount we can get to it doesn't justify the extra cost to go after it. We can typically only get about 50 to 80 grand from a call that federalizes the projects and causes a lot more costs and efforts into them. When TAC met in this 2019 effort, we came up with what was referred to on that map as a short list of projects. Each community got their #1 project funded up to the same amount. So we were all treated equally in terms of project needs. So each community at that time got something back from the effort we were putting into on an equal basis. Once everybody's initial projects were funded, then it went from a scoring committee basis on which was the next highest priority from everybody's view. So at that time, it took a much different approach than the federal dollars. And I thought it was a very good benefit to Timnath. Don't know how it's going to be structured this time if something were to move forward, but it can be structured very differently. And the TAC and the other elected officials group came up with that structure last time, which I felt was very equally weighted to distribute the dollars around the region in that last effort.
Thank you, Eric. Any other comments from staff or? Okay. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn the work session?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Okay. We'll call to order the meeting for the Timnath Landing General Improvement District. Melissa, can we do a roll call?
Yes. Chairperson Mark Sukup, Co-Chair Brett Hansen,
Here.
Commissioner Lisa Lake. Here. Commissioner Robert Oxmacher,
Present.
Commissioner Luke Wagner.
Here.
All right, are there any amendments to the agenda? No amendments. Next is the consent agenda, which consists of the approval of the December 14th Timnath Landing GID meeting minutes. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
I move to approve the December 14th, 2021 Timnath Landing GID meeting minutes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Any chairperson or commissioner reports? All right, moving on to business. Resolution number GID 01, Series 2022, a resolution accepting the 2021 audit performed by Whitfley. Lisa, go ahead.
Good evening. What you have before you is the 2021 audit for the Improvement District. This audit was performed by Whitfley as a blended component unit. These financials will also roll into the town audit. For the 2021 year, the activity consisted of $7,000 in administrative expense, and that's in the form of a town advance to be paid back at a future date. That brings the total town advance due to $65,000. And then we had developer advances of $2.6 million, which brings the developer advance total to $4 million. This activity will just accrue. We'll keep accumulating the expenses and liabilities until we can issue the debt to be reimbursed. And it is a clean audit opinion, and there were no recommended adjustments or no management representation letter with suggested improvements over internal controls. If there's any questions.
I don't see any questions. Thank you, Lisa. With that, do I have a motion?
I move to approve a resolution accepting the 2021 audit performed by Whitfley.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn the General Improvement District meeting?
I move to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Next, we'll call to order the Timnath Town Council meeting. Melissa, can we do a roll call?
Mayor Mark Sukup, Mayor Pro Tem Brett Collins. Brett Hansen,
I am here.
Councilmember Lisa Lake,
Here.
Councilmember Robert Oxmacher,
Present.
Councilmember Luke Wagner.
Here.
Thank you. Aaron, are there any amendments to the agenda? Public comment. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment for items not on the agenda?
No, sir.
Thank you. Consent agenda. Any comments or questions from council on the consent agenda?
And I would move to pull item 4C from the consent agenda, please.
Okay, item 4C, the first reading and setting a public hearing on May 24th, 2022 for ordinance number 7, series 2022, and ordinance approving 4021 Kern Street rezoning. We'll pull that from the consent agenda. Aaron, does it make sense to do that one first in the business or do that at the end?
That's totally at your discretion, but
Okay.
it might make sense to just knock that out first.
Okay. That'll be our first business item then. Any other comments or questions on the consent agenda? Okay, the consent agenda then consists of approval of the April 26, 2022 Town Council meeting minutes, the April 22nd, 2022 check register, resolution number 21, series 2022, a resolution appointing Councilmember Lisa Lake to the Parks, Recreation, Open Space and Trails Committee, and resolution number 22, series 2022, a resolution appointing the Town of Timnath Finance Committee members. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes 4-0. Council member reports. Lisa, go ahead.
I just want to give a big shout out to all of our staff for the safety fair. I went to that, I think that was like last weekend or the weekend before, and ended up spending quite a bit of time there. It was a beautiful day, lots of different police cars to look at and ambulances, or there wasn't an ambulance this time, there was the all the different vehicles, the helicopter and the police dogs and things like that. So huge shout out to everyone for putting that together. I know it's been a couple years since we've done that, and I feel like there was a pretty good turnout, even though the day started out really windy. So I think that kind of cut down a little bit on that. I also wanted to, I know we have the town cleanup day coming up, and I know in the past we've done a spring and a fall. I don't remember if we have our fall date scheduled. If we do not, can we look at all the different neighborhoods in town and when they do their garage sales? I know most of them do them usually the same couple weekends or something like that. Because I did get a comment again about why are we doing this before the garage sale? Because people want to have the garage sale. That's just my neighborhood though, so I know that. So, but if we can just look at all of the different dates and then kind of plan that out accordingly. And then one last thing is, it was something that just came to my mind when we were in our work session earlier. In the past, and it's been quite a few years, we've had a day where town staff and council will tour the town and look at the different properties that are owned by the town, as well as different things that are going on. And I was wondering if that would be a possibility to plan something like that again. It's been a little while, and I know the town is looking a little different than it did back then. So it was a great opportunity. I know I did one when I was kind of early on council, and it was really helpful to me. And I think it would be helpful again for me to kind of just look at that. So.
Thanks, Lisa. Aaron, if you can kind of help organize all that, that'd be great. And yeah, the safety fair was great. I did have to explain to my kids that stormtroopers were not actually emergency response personnel, but other than that, it was very smooth for them and they loved it very much. Thank you. With that, we'll move into items of business. We'll move first into our first reading and setting of a public hearing on May 24th, 2022 at 6 p.m. for ordinance number 7, series 2022, ordinance approving 4021 Kern Street rezoning. Chad.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So since this is an amendment to an official document with the town, the zoning map, it is actually an ordinance. So this is just the first reading, setting up a date in the future, May 24th, to have the additional public hearing. However, the applicant is available and staff is available to answer any questions if you have them now. I do not have a presentation at this time, but we can answer those questions.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate your patience in us pulling that from the consent agenda. The main reason I did that is I know we're discussing property 2 doors down here today as well. And so being new to council, I was just curious about any background on this block and the history in terms of why this was previously zoned other than residential, and then why we're looking to go back now.
Yeah, so the original zoning for that, when we created these zoning districts, was the Old Town residential. However, the homeowner at the time wanted to expand and create home occupation uses that were not necessarily available within that R1 zoning district. Since it is part of the comp plan to have that business, they did decide to change that zoning to the business. And then the lot was split and sold off. They did not pursue any of those, to my knowledge, any of those uses or opportunities within that business district. That's why staff felt comfortable kind of bringing it back to the original, being a little more conforming to the character of that street.
Okay, so the view here is that it is more in compliance with the comprehensive plan there, and that it's actually kind of a benefit to the town, so to speak, in supporting this?
They both are equally compliant with that comprehensive plan. They're both an allowable zoning district for it. But as far as the setbacks and different architectural styles within that street, it does change some things. There were requirements for a business zone that would pull it closer to the street, which would kind of, if you were to build a new home, it would be a little, it'd be different than what is currently going on in that street residentially. So that's sort of where that zoning distinction change came about.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments? With that, do I have a motion on the resolution?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion, first reading and setting a public hearing on May 24th, 2022 at 6 p.m. for ordinance number 7, series 2022, an ordinance approving 4021 Kern Street rezoning, passes 4-0. Next item of business, resolution number 23, series 2022, a resolution approving 4001 Kern Street minor subdivision. We'll first go to Chad for that.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Are you guys seeing that on your screens? Perfect. So this is a minor subdivision proposal for the property of 4001 Kern Street. The owner and applicant is David Manring. The subject property outlined there in blue is located on the southwest corner of 5th Avenue and Kern Street, within that block of 4th Avenue and 5th Avenue in Old Town. It is zoned R1, Old Town residential, and the property consists of 7,100 square feet and includes an existing single-family detached residence. The application proposes to subdivide the existing lot into 2 lots. Lot 1 will consist of 4,566 square feet of vacant land for the use of a future single-family residence. Lot 2 to the south has 2,534 square feet with the existing residence. Both lots will substantially comply with the comprehensive plan's land use designation of downtown core, which allows for both business and R1, while also meeting the applicable development standards and criteria in the Timnath Land Use Code. I do not believe the applicant or owner is here today, but I am happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments? Was there any kind of neighborhood meeting on this particular one, or?
There is not one for a minor subdivision.
Okay.
There is for the rezoning.
Okay, thank you. With that, do I have a motion?
I move to approve the 4001 Kern Street minor subdivision.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion, resolution number 23, series 2022, a resolution approving 4001 Kern Street minor subdivision, passes 4-0. Any other comments or from council before we adjourn? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.